Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the home of champions, which also happens to be the home of our Season 8 champions. And today we look to see if they will be dethroned. These are the finals of Rift Valley region, Kapsabet town, Nandi County. I am your host, Esperancia Kapanga.
And I am Chris Boru. The bone of contention between our intellectual teams in this final is Africa has failed in upholding human rights and should surrender this responsibility to international bodies.
In the proposition, we have the gentlemen from Chesamisi High School.
And in the opposition, we have Kapsabet Boys High School, who seek to retain their title as the champions of Season 8. Will they retain it?
Let's wait and see. Proposer number 1, you have 3 minutes to make a statement.
My name is Changeyo Duncan Kiprop from Chesamisi. And I'm here to propose the motion that states Africa has failed in upholding human rights and should surrender this responsibility to international bodies. Chinua Achebe said in his book Rights of Civil Peace in Ghana, and says that it is just a matter of time before the pot breaks. It is true that it is evident that Africa has failed to uphold the human rights. From Lume to Freetown, Kinshasa to Luanda, Uganda to Kampala, we have seen massive arrest of people who are against the government. For instance, Bobby Wine, a politician from Ghetto, was arrested from unwanted arrest from the sitting president, Yoweri Museveni. Bobby Wine was arrested because he is against the President Yoweri Museveni. Yoweri Museveni, who went to power in 1997 and has been ruling Uganda for all those years. You can do the mathematics. The African organizations have known this. They have known that Yoweri Museveni has been leading Uganda for a very long time, but they are not doing anything. They're just sitting and watching. It is high time that we allow the international bodies to come and settle this matter of human rights in Africa. The prolonged civil wars in southern Sudan as a result of political interest between President Salva Kiir and Dr. Machar has denied the Southerners the rights to protection, education, and life. We've seen massive loss of lives. Days and nights, people are slaughtered like animals. At this rate, how will the generation of Sudan attain their goals? We all know that every country has a goal that aims to achieve. According to the leaders of international campaign against terrorism, led by the United States of America, Sub-Saharan Africa is a fertile breeding ground for the recruitment of terrorists. The terrorists like Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram in Nigeria. These bodies, the African organizations, they all know the things that are going on in Nigeria, and they're not doing anything about it. That is why America has come to fight against the Al-Shabaab. And that is why I strongly feel that Africa has failed to uphold human rights. Thank you.
First proposer, you have 3 minutes to make your submissions.
The time I'll be reading my dictionary. There is this saying that catches my eye every other time, that it is the shoe wearer who knows where it pinches most. Kogo Victor Seymour from Kapsabet High School, here to strongly oppose this motion that states Africa has failed in upholding human rights and should surrender the responsibility to international bodies. Well, what is to fail? What is to fail? To fail is to be unsuccessful in achieving something. And what is to uphold? To uphold is to support something that you think is right and make sure that it continues to exist. What is to surrender? What is to surrender? Is to admit that you have been defeated and want to stop fighting. To stop fighting. Well, what are international bodies? These are organizations that are created for the attainment of certain goals in various countries. Why do we say this? Well, in the recent years, according to Africa Renewal Online Magazine, an article dated July 2014, we have seen in the recent years in Africa, democracy spread across the continent, and vital importance of the human rights for African long-term security and development has been gaining recognition. You will agree with me that in 2004, the African Union officially established the African Court on Human and People's Rights, which in 15 years of its operationalism, the court has already brought about renewed hope and optimism within the African human rights system. Well, the court has dealt with over 71 cases, convicted over 40 people who violate human rights. 41, over 41. It is in Africa where we see practices like early marriages. We see the archaic culture of early marriages. Well, how are we going to surrender to people who are new to us? People who in the first place come and get fascinated by whatever we have. How will they now come and tell us how to correct what they know nothing about? Nelson Mandela says that talk to a man in a language that he understands, it goes to his head. But if you talk to him in his own language, it goes to his heart. So which is better? Let us talk to ourselves about our rights in our own language, and it will go to our hearts. Grazie.
Second proposer, you have 3 minutes for cross-examination.
Daniel Cohen once said, eccentric beliefs not only add spice to life, they can stimulate the mind. David Chikuku, Chesamisi High School. On to my first point. Africa has failed to uphold the right to fair trial in African courts. Now, if we believe that we ourselves can judge ourselves, remember the case of the 2007 post-election violence, where the accused felt that there would be no justice in Kenya. And so, since the retired John Kafu of Ghana had tried and failed, they demanded to be tried in ICC. Why was that? Because they believe that we Kenyans cannot judge ourselves. Because they believe that we are corrupt. So, let us look at the bigger picture. Shouldn't we allow other people to do for us what we can't do best? On to my second point. Most African countries have failed to provide basic needs to their citizens, such as right to clean water, life, food, and better health. An example is the recent reports of death in Turkana as a result of hunger and drought. Our leaders are in power, yes, but they don't want to provide for us. Is that really what we want? Shouldn't we allow the international bodies to come and help us, since our African leaders don't want to give us voice, and they should be the voice of the voiceless? It's a proof that the government has failed from the Ministry of Agriculture to ensnare if there is any food in the country. No wonder People are dying. We don't get food. Why? The government doesn't want to provide for us. On to my third point. We are seeing that people, leaders, do not want to do for us jobs. For example, we have leaders who are dictators. They didn't give us a chance to speak for ourselves. Any kind of talk, you will be killed. You will be jailed. Why? Because they do not think of us. All they think is about themselves. Should we allow such kind of leaders to rule us? Should we allow such Africans to uphold our human rights, to give us laws that will only benefit them and not us? Once again, David Shikuku, Chesamisi High School.
Second opposer, you have 3 minutes for cross-examination.
My name is Johnson Aboge from Kapsabet High School. And I feel I need to remind our opponents of some few facts. President Museveni started his tenure in 1986 and not 1997. We should also remember one thing. You have told us animatedly how Uganda has failed to uphold human rights and how South Sudan has failed to uphold human rights. But if you look at South Sudan, just go a little bit north and look at Sudan. They were able to topple their own president, Omar al-Bashir, and put him into prison. And they prosecuted him themselves, despite him having immunity as a president. Mean that we are making strides. About these international bodies, you find that their credibility is wanting. The same Museveni that you're talking about only recently, if you look at the ICC website is priding in announcing to us that they held a joint press conference with Museveni, where Museveni referred one of his opponents, the leader of the Lord's Resistance Army, because he's his opponent, to ICC. And ICC was there with a joint press conference with him. If you look at the corridors of justice, there is no way that a judge and a plaintiff or a respondent can stand together and you say that that case is free and fair. It is downright unfair, and these people are biased. If you look at also Rwanda's president's sentiments, Paul Kagame, he said animatedly that Africa is like a dinner table for the ICC. When you look at all the cases that we have had in the ICC, more than 10 have been applied to Africa. And out of the 10 convicts that are there in ICC, 5 of them are from Africa. Meaning that they only view Africa as the point of rights infringement. Yet they forget that there was George Walker Bush who caused a genocide in Iraq, but they never indicted him. That shows very much bias, and we should not trust them. In Kiswahili, there's a saying that kitanda usichokilalia hujui kunguni wake. They do not know our problems. How do we now start forwarding them our problems, yet they do not know these things? In terms of upholding also the right to healthcare, you will find that African governments have been able to do this overwhelmingly. Only recently in Kenya, we were able to do what we call an awake craniotomy. That is a brain surgery on an awake patient. If we look at the current trends in the Big Four agenda, we have the universal health coverage. We also had the reimplantation of a severe male genitalia from a boy in Meru. The right to quality healthcare among Africans is improving day by day, yet you want to tell us that we have failed. We have not failed. We are only making progress, though it's slowly, but let us get into leadership. We'll fast track it. Thank you.
The proposers have been asked. They stated that the reason why they would like our problems to be handed over to international bodies is because we have corrupt systems here at home. And the question is, isn't that being escapist of our own problems? Shouldn't we just face them head on? The opposers, on the other hand, have been asked for an example of an African organization that oversees the upholding of human rights here in Africa. Third proposer, you have 3 minutes to respond.
To my brother from Kapsabet High School, you asked us a question that by giving our problems to the national agencies? Aren't we running away from our problems? Well, remember that these problems, before we handle them to the national agencies, first of all, we try to solve them. And by trying to solve them, African Union has failed. Examples are the cases whereby we take people like Salva Kiir of Sudan just because they are detecting us in a manner that is not appropriate. You see? So then we are not running away from our problems, but we are trying to seek for a balance. African Union may decide to release these leaders. When these leaders come, they are not taken from power. They are returned back to power, and they continue their harassment. If you want to test a man's character, then you have to give him power. A wise saying from Abraham Lincoln. You know, by giving our African leaders the power to be able to rule us, these people are using that power to be able to suppress us of our freedom. And this is happening through ways such as the civil wars. People of the country are trying to fight with the governmental organizations just because these people are trying to suppress them of their freedom, of their rights. And so you see cases like Sudan, Somalia, these people are having civil wars inside their countries just because the leaders, instead of using the power to be able to promote justice to all sides, they are using the power to be able to promote what they want to their side. So that is creating an imbalance between the coins of the country and of the organization. Now, on to my second point. Surely, if it means that African Union is really curbing our problems, why do we cry of hunger? Why do we cry of medical sustenance? So you see, African Union is not trying to help us at all. If this African Union would have helped us, we wouldn't have had cases such as the World Health Organization inside this Africa. We would have been dependent on our own selves. But it's because we are insufficient and because Africa, the funds that we are giving them, they are using them for their own purposes, that the legal agencies are trying to find a way to be able to help us. And you know, brotherhood is unity. So then these legal agencies are trying to give us hope that indeed we may be one. So please, brothers, by telling me that the Africa Union has not failed, I can't understand you. Olga Mtonyi, Chesamisi High School. Thank you.
Third opposer, you have 3 minutes to respond.
To answer the question that has been given by a brother of mine from St. Joseph's, Kitale. You've asked about the organizations that we have in Africa that will help us to solve these issues of human rights. I would like to give you an example of an NGO we have in Kenya, Kenya Human Rights Commission by Professor Makau Mutua. I would also like you to refer to the African Court for Human Rights by Justice Ben Kioko, who is the Vice President, headquarters Arusha, Tanzania. We also have a governmental commission or platform in each and every African country which supports human rights, an example being the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights. Now to my outlined points. International bodies have been there for quite some time, but what change have they made in enforcement of human rights? We've been having the UN since the year 1946 till now, but we still have people whose rights are being offended, whose rights are being denied. What are they doing about it? Charity begins at home. I believe that we cannot state that we'll fully surrender the responsibility of dealing with human rights to international bodies because we also have to do something. The government should take up the task. I believe that there might be somebody in the crowd right now who's asking, so if international bodies are not the solution, what is? I would like to give my first solution. We should embrace duty to protect and promote human rights. Protection of human rights shouldn't be limited to only international bodies, but it should be shared by the international bodies and the governments of these African countries, hence supporting SDG number 17, which is Partnership for the Goals. we also have learning about human rights. I believe that both the citizens of Kenya and the government should be fully aware of the rights that we have in the country. If these rights are implemented and if each and every person is aware of these rights, I believe that it will lead to better understanding of the rights that we have in the country. Third, I would like to refer to participation in local human rights activism. In the Constitution of Kenya, we are given the liberty to have peaceful demonstrations so that we can actually help in raising our issues to the government. I believe that will actually do the country a lot of good, and not only the country, but the entire continent of Africa. I believe that will do the continent a lot of good if we have the government paying concentration to these activists and these issues that are brought about by the demonstrations. Thank you. That is all I have. I believe I have nothing to add.
Proposition, you have 1 minute to give a final submission.
It is very sickening to find that we are still debating that us as Africans can take care of ourselves. Now, you as our opposers have talked about what work is the international bodies doing concerning our human rights. Now, let me educate you. The only way for international bodies to get into country matters is for the government to accept them too. You have also talked about peaceful demonstrations in Kenya. What about during the elections when the opposition NASA, was being scattered? The police were using tear gas on them. Why? Because they did not want them to publicly say how they were rigged of the elections. According to amnesty.org, in Kenya we have a high number of refugees. So, what are they doing here? Shouldn't the international bodies come and help us so that we may feed them, clothe them? Because we know sharing is caring. David Shikuku, Chesamisi High School.
Opposition, you have 1 minute to give your final submission.
Thank you for speaking about NASA. I'm a supporter, and we solved that one easily by ourselves through a handshake. Thank you. Permit me to analogize this motion by comparing Africa and human rights as not husband and wife, but rather two lovers. You see, for people to marry, you need to date and get to know each other so that the relationship can be okay. But if you see a country like South Sudan, they have been dating with human rights for 6 years. That's why the relationship is still not very stable. But give them enough time, like United States has 200 years of independence. That's why you see their marriage is solid. So they need just a little bit more time. And if you analogize again the same, and look at this egg. This is a product between a marriage of a hen and a cock. And we have one problem here. The chick that is inside here that's developing needs to get outside. So I wonder, do I need to strike this thing, or I just lay it in an incubator and it gets out by itself? Africa needs to solve its own problems. Just like the chick will be alive only when it gets out of this cocoon, or rather shell, by itself. Thank you.
Chesamisi boys, Kiprop, we are very bold, composed, and sure. You broke down the motion quite well. However, I was expecting so much from you, but you didn't bring it out. You are a very good speaker, very composed, so there's so much expected from you as a first speaker. David, you did not really cross-examine the first speaker from the proposer side, so your role was not well played, but you still brought out some of the rights well. And you brought this thing out, that most bodies in Africa have failed to handle the issues given to them. That was a stronghold from your side. Now, Olga, also very composed on stage, but at one time you really didn't seem to be sure of your presentation.
Africa has failed in upholding human rights. For you, the proposition, you're cleanly supposed to show us how we have failed. And we know the human rights that we could mention, all right? And for the opposition as well, you're supposed to show us how we have done it well. Am I convinced these things were done? Not yet. Otherwise, we'll be here shouting and saying excellent because now we're seeing that we have done very well and all that. But am I persuaded in one direction? Yes, a little bit. So I think there could have been many examples because when you look at other continents, there are continents that suffer human rights. In fact, some of them just allowed even women to drive the other day. Such things are there. There's a lot of oppression, even in the Asian continent and the likes. Were there mentions of such? I did not see. So could there have been a deeper even level of debating this? Absolutely, with more research. So there is a level of that I would have desired to also see that, and it calls for a challenge that, especially when you're on the finals, that you get even more deeper with the research levels. That being said, I want to wish you well, finalists, and we will wait for the results.
Thank you so much. The two teams, you've done well, and we appreciate that. One or two things. Both teams, you never gave us examples of the human rights. My main reason of picking this mic is to appreciate Ezra. This time round, you've matured and you blended so well with the rest of the team. Congratulations.